The
The
emergency
readings
lights cast
indicate that the
everything in
anomaly is
that particular
stabilizing.
shade of
We
red
should be
that
able to
made
proceed with
even
the
water
mission
look like
shortly.
blood, which Commander James Hartley thought was perhaps appropriate given the circumstances. The ceasefire had been called 43 hours ago, and he still couldn't quite believe it was real. 7 years of war didn't just end with a signed document transmitted across quantum channels. 7 years of war ended with exhausted soldiers sitting in rubble, wondering what came next. The neutral zone's trading station, what remained of it anyway, groaned under its own weight. Hartley stepped carefully through the debris, his boots crunching on shattered plexi steel that had once been observation windows. Through the gaps in the hull, he could see the debris field stretching for thousands of kilometers, a glittering cemetery of ships both human and Zeleny. Some still leaked atmosphere, creating brief auroras as oxygen met the trace particles of the nebula beyond. "Sir, the Zeleny delegation will arrive in 20 minutes, Lieutenant Torres announced, her voice carrying through his earpiece. "Their queen is actually coming personally. Their queen is coming here, to this wreck." Hartley looked around at what passed for their conference room, a former restaurant that now featured an artistic arrangement of exposed conduits and a table made from welded hull plating. Someone had tried to make it presentable by covering the worst burns with a tarp that proclaimed "Galaxy's best neutrally sourced coffee" in 17 languages. "Affirmative, sir. Queen Lyreley herself. Intelligence suggests she's been personally overseeing their fleet movements for the last 2 years." Hartley rubbed his eyes. He'd been awake for 36 hours straight, fueled by stimulants that the medical officer insisted were perfectly safe but made everything taste purple. Well, at least we won't have to worry about the wine selection. Pretty sure the wine storage got vented into space somewhere around year 3 of this mess. Actually, sir, Corporal Chen found a bottle of something green in what used to be the kitchen. He says it's either Zeleny ceremonial liquor or industrial coolant. The label is half melted. Fantastic. Nothing says let's discuss peace like potential poisoning. When the Zeleny shuttle docked 17 minutes later, Hartley stood as straight as his exhausted body would allow. He'd managed to find a uniform that only had minor scorch marks, which counted as formal wear these days. The airlock cycled with a hiss that sounded distinctly unhealthy, and then she entered. Queen Lyreley of the Zeleny Empire was not what he'd expected. The propaganda had painted her as a cold, calculating destroyer of worlds. The intelligence reports suggested a brilliant military mind wrapped in aristocratic arrogance. What walked through that broken airlock was a woman who looked like she'd personally carried the weight of every dead soldier on both sides for the entire war. She stood tall. Zeleny were generally a hand's breadth taller than humans, with the distinctive elongated, pointed ears that marked her species. They twitched slightly as she surveyed the devastation, a nervous gesture perhaps, or maybe just processing the spectacular amount of damage they'd all managed to achieve. Her violet eyes moved across the room, taking in the conference table, the exposed wiring, and the tarp with its coffee advertisement, which chose that moment to lose one corner and flap sadly in the recycled air. "Commander Hartley," she said, her voice carrying the musical quality that all Zeleny had but tempered with exhaustion that was utterly universal. "I would say it's a pleasure, but I believe we've moved past the need for such pleasant fictions." "Your Majesty," he replied with a slight bow that his back immediately protested. "Welcome to what's left of Neutral Station 7. I'd offer you our finest accommodations, but I'm fairly certain our finest accommodations are currently floating past that window." She looked where he pointed, and indeed, what appeared to be half of a luxury suite drifted by, its bed still somehow made with military precision despite being in the vacuum of space. "At least your housekeeping standards remain intact," she observed, and he could have sworn he saw the ghost of a smile touch her lips. "Shall we discuss how to stop turning perfectly good space stations into modern art installations?" They sat at the makeshift table, her royal guards taking positions that somehow managed to look dignified despite one having to stand next to a sparking power coupling that occasionally shot blue flames. Hartley's own security detail tried to match their professionalism, though Sergeant Webb was definitely eyeing the sparking coupling with concern. "Before we begin," Lyreley said, producing a data pad that looked pristine enough to have come from a pre-war museum, "I should inform you that my government's position is that this war has become—" She paused, those distinctive ears twitching again, "catastrophically stupid." Hartley, who had been preparing for diplomatic doublespeak and careful negotiations, nearly choked on his own surprise. "I'm sorry, could you repeat that? My translator must be malfunctioning." "Catastrophically stupid," she repeated, enunciating each word with the care of someone who had practiced this phrase. "I believe that's the correct human term. My advisors suggested counterproductive to mutual prosperity. But that doesn't quite capture the magnitude of our collective idiocy, does it?" "No," Hartley agreed, feeling something loosen in his chest that had been tight for 7 years. "It really doesn't. We've spent enough resources to terraform 17 planets on turning perfectly good stations into abstract sculptures." 18 planets, she corrected. "I had the figures calculated. 18 habitable worlds, or alternatively, one truly spectacular theme park." She pulled up a holographic display from her pad, showing the economic projections. The numbers were so catastrophically large that they'd had to invent new terms for the denominations. A theme park. Hartley found himself genuinely curious despite everything. "My younger sister's suggestion. She's 12 in your years and maintains this entire conflict could have been avoided if we just built the galaxy's most epic water slide complex instead." Lyreley's ears drooped slightly. "I'm beginning to think she might have been our best strategic advisor." The tension in the room, which had been thick enough to cut with a plasma torch, began to ease slightly. Even the guards seemed to relax marginally, though whether from the absurdity or exhaustion was hard to tell. "So," Hartley said, leaning forward and immediately regretting it as the table creaked ominously, "you're proposing what exactly?" "Something radical," she replied, her violet eyes meeting his directly. "Instead of a traditional ceasefire where we retreat to our corners and glare at each other across the neutral zone, I propose we work together to fix this mess. Joint reconstruction efforts, human and Zeleny working side by side. You want our species to work together, after everything." He gestured vaguely at the devastation around them. "We've proven quite thoroughly that we're excellent at destroying things together," she said, that ghost of a smile returning. "Perhaps we might try building instead. Besides, do you have any idea how much paperwork a traditional peace treaty requires? My scribes tell me we'd need 17 years just to properly document the grievances. I'd rather spend that time actually fixing things." The sparking power coupling chose that moment to shoot a particularly impressive burst of blue flame, causing everyone except Lyreley to flinch. She merely glanced at it with the resignation of someone who'd seen too much to be bothered by minor electrical fires. "Your proposal has merit," Hartley admitted, his tactical mind already working through the implications. "But our peoples have been killing each other for 7 years. How do we just stop?" "By giving them something more important to do," she said simply. "Survival tends to override grudges. We rebuild together or we collapse separately. The mathematics are quite clear, even if my sister's water park suggestion isn't taken seriously." The morning briefing had become something of a ritual over the past 6 months, though calling it morning was generous when you were orbiting a binary star system that never quite achieved anything resembling night. Hartley arrived at the Joint Command Center carrying 2 cups of what passed for coffee, one prepared with human preferences, the other modified with the specific mineral supplements that prevented Zeleny from experiencing what they politely called unfortunate digestive consequences. Lyreley was already there, studying a holographic display of supply routes with the intensity of someone defusing a quantum bomb. Her ears twitched in acknowledgement of his presence before she spoke. "James, please tell me the number I'm seeing for our chocolate shipment is a typo." He set her cup down carefully, noting the way she'd started using his first name about 3 months ago, right after the incident with the malfunctioning gravity generator that had left them both floating upside down for an hour during a crucial budget meeting. Which number would that be? 5,000 tons. She turned to face him, her violet eyes wide with concern. 5,000 tons of chocolate. Did we experience a collective head injury that I've forgotten about? Hartley pulled up his own display, scrolling through the manifest. Then he saw it. Oh no. Oh no, her ears flattened slightly. That's your "I've made a terrible mistake" voice. I've learned to recognize it after the synthetic meat incident. Remember last week when you asked me for construction materials for Section 7, the ferrocomposite panels? Yes, the ones marked FC7 on the human manifest system. Right, well, he turned his screen toward her. Turns out FC7 is also the designation for festive chocolates, grade 7, in our civilian supply database. Someone must have clicked the wrong drop-down menu. She stared at him, then at the screen, then back at him. We ordered 5,000 tons of festive chocolate instead of whole plating. Grade 7 festive chocolate. Apparently it comes with little ribbons. The silence stretched between them for approximately 3 seconds before Lyralay's composed expression cracked. The laugh that escaped her was decidedly unqueenly, a sound somewhere between a snort and a musical note that made her guards exchange glances of barely concealed amazement. "Well," she managed between breaths, "I suppose we're about to have the best protected candy store in the galaxy, or the sweetest space station. The publicity department will have a field day. We could build morale," Hartley suggested weakly. "Nothing says successful peace process like diabetes." Lieutenant Torres chose that moment to enter, stopping short at the sight of her commanding officer and the alien queen both struggling to maintain composure. "Sir, Your Majesty, the morning construction crews are asking about the unusual delivery in Bay 4. Tell them it's a strategic morale reserve," Lyralay said with remarkable dignity for someone whose ears were still twitching with suppressed laughter. "To be distributed according to a rationing protocol we'll develop, eventually." Torres nodded slowly. "Of course. Should I also mention that the Zeleny crew in Section 3 have accidentally connected the human music system to the station-wide communications array? We're currently broadcasting something called Disco Fever Megamix to approximately 300,000 beings." Hartley buried his face in his hands. "Of course they did. Is that the one with the repetitive bass frequency?" Lyralay asked with interest. "Some of my engineers report it has an oddly soothing quality. They've increased productivity by 12%. Your engineers find disco soothing?" "Apparently it reminds them of our industrial mining equipment. Very nostalgic." The day continued in what had become their new normal, a series of small crises interspersed with moments of unexpected cooperation. They'd moved from the morning briefing to the reconstruction floor, where human and Zeleny workers were attempting to install new power conduits. The cultural exchange program had yielded interesting results, including a hybrid profanity that both species had adopted when things went wrong. "Flarg dammit," echoed across the floor as a human technician dropped a wrench into the gravity null zone they'd accidentally created. The tool floated serenely past a Zeleny worker who grabbed it with her tail. Another difference Hartley had noted: the prehensile tails that Zeleny possessed and used with casual efficiency. "You know," Lyralay observed, standing beside him on the observation platform, 6 months ago that human would have been shooting at that Zeleny. And now they're sharing tools and creating new curse words together. Progress." She smiled, an expression he'd learned to recognize and look forward to. "Speaking of progress, I've been meaning to ask about human humor. My attempts have been less than successful." "You've been attempting humor?" "Yesterday, I told Ambassador Williams a joke. He just stared at me with what I believe you call existential dread. What was the joke? She cleared her throat. Why did the spaceship cross the nebula? Hartley winced preemptively. Why? To reach the other gravitational field. She delivered it with such earnest enthusiasm that he couldn't help but smile. You see, it's funny because spaceships don't actually need reasons to cross nebulae, and gravitational fields are technically everywhere, so the premise itself is. Lyra. He'd started using the shortened version of her name after she'd explicitly asked him to, claiming her full title was giving her ceremonial fatigue. That's not so much a joke as it is a physics observation. Her ears drooped slightly. My sister said the same thing. She suggested I try observational humor instead. Such as, have you noticed that when humans are confused, you tilt your heads like curious ground mammals? It's quite endearing. Before he could respond, an alarm began blaring, not the sharp, terrifying wail of an emergency, but the almost apologetic beep of the something has gone wrong but nobody is currently dying, alert they'd installed after too many false panics. Report, Lyra called out, her command voice cutting through the noise. A harried-looking Zeleny engineer appeared on their displays. Your Majesty, Commander, we have a situation in Recreation Dome 2. The Human Cultural Exchange team attempted to teach the Zeleny staff about something called bowling. They've modified the gravity controls to create the ultimate lane. And, Hartley prompted, already dreading the answer. The balls are now orbiting the dome at approximately 200 kilometers per hour. We've had to evacuate. Also, someone bet Chief Engineer Tarkvan that he couldn't score a strike in zero gravity, and now the entire Zeleny engineering department is demanding a tournament. Lyra and Hartley exchanged glances. I'll handle the gravity situation, he offered. I'll organize the tournament, she replied. If we're going to have diplomatic incidents, they might as well be entertaining ones. As they walked toward Recreation Dome 2 together, their security details having long since given up on maintaining proper protective distances, Hartley found himself genuinely enjoying the absurdity of it all. 6 months ago, he'd been planning battle strategies. Now he was calculating the orbital mechanics of bowling balls, while an alien queen beside him tried to understand why humans found spherical objects hitting vertical pins entertaining. James, Lyra asked as they reached the dome's entrance, through which they could see bowling balls creating elegant figure-8 patterns in the air. Yes. After we solve this crisis, would you be willing to explain human humor to me over dinner? Your food preferences remain deeply mysterious, but I'm willing to attempt that pizza thing your staff keeps recommending. Only if you promise not to put those fermented algae strips your people love on it. The smell alone could be classified as a war crime. Now that, she said with satisfaction, was definitely a joke. The plasma bolt missed Lyra's head by centimeters, close enough that the heat singed several strands of her silver hair. In the split second that followed, Hartley's body moved before his mind could process the decision, tackling her behind an overturned cargo container as 3 more bolts seared through the space where she'd been standing. Stay down. He pressed her against the colony's prefab wall, his body shielding hers while his security detail returned fire. The peaceful inspection of Kepler Colony's new water treatment facility had become a firefight in seconds. James, you're bleeding, she said, her voice remarkably steady for someone who'd nearly been assassinated. Her hand came away from his shoulder red. Just a graze, Tor's report. 2 shooters both down, checking for others. His lieutenant's voice crackled through the comm. Mixed species, sir. 1 human, 1 Zeleny. This was coordinated. Lyra's ears flattened completely against her head, a sign of extreme distress he'd learned to recognize. Extremists from both sides working together. How wonderfully progressive of them. Can you move? He helped her to her feet, trying to ignore the way the world tilted slightly. The graze was deeper than he'd thought. I'm unharmed, but you're not. She supported his weight as they moved toward the medical station, her deceptive strength evident. That was monumentally stupid, James. You're welcome. I didn't thank you yet. You were getting around to it. The medical station erupted into controlled chaos when they arrived. Dr. Ashab Patel, the station's chief medical officer, took one look at Hartley and started muttering in 3 different languages, none of them complimentary. "Let me guess," she said, pulling on surgical gloves with the anger of someone who'd specifically told him to avoid getting shot this week. "You decided to use yourself as a shield again." "It worked. That's not the point." She began cutting away his uniform jacket. "We've talked about your heroic self-sacrifice complex. We had charts." Lyreley hadn't let go of his hand, he realized. When had she taken it? Her violet eyes were fixed on the blood seeping through his shirt with an intensity that made his heart rate monitor beep faster, which made Dr. Patel glare at both of them. No, the royal authority in that single word could have stopped a supernova. "I'm staying." The next few hours blurred together. Surgery to remove shrapnel he hadn't even felt. Reports flooding in about the assassination attempt, definitely coordinated, definitely aimed at destroying the peace process by killing its architects. Through it all, Lyreley remained, even when her advisors practically begged her to return to the secure compound. He woke to find her asleep in the uncomfortable medical chair beside his bed, using her formal cape as a blanket. Someone, probably Patel, had draped a standard-issue hospital blanket over her. Even in sleep, her hand rested near his on the bed, not quite touching but close enough that he could feel the warmth. "She hasn't left," Patel informed him, checking his vitals with the efficiency of someone who'd patched up too many soldiers. 14 hours. Her guards have been rotating in shifts, looking increasingly concerned. Apparently, queens don't usually maintain bedside vigils. She's not exactly a traditional queen. No kidding. She threatened to declare war on medical equipment when your heart rate dropped during surgery. I had to explain that was normal. Twice. When Lyreley woke an hour later, her first words were, "You drooled on me once." Hartley blinked, still foggy from pain medication. "What?" 3 months ago. The budget meeting that went for 37 hours. You fell asleep on my shoulder and drooled on my ceremonial robes. Her ears twitched. "I'm telling you this so we're even. I apparently snore, according to your security detail who have been smirking at me for the past 2 hours. You don't snore, you purr. It's a Zeleny thing." "We do not purr." "You absolutely purr. It's actually quite soothing." Before she could respond, the door burst open, and a young Zeleny rushed in carrying what appeared to be a refrigerated container. "Your Majesty, I brought the human recuperation aids you requested." Lyreley's expression shifted to one of determination. "Excellent. James, I've researched human recovery practices extensively." "Oh no." She began unpacking the container with enthusiasm. "First, ice therapy. Your medical texts were very specific about ice being helpful for injuries. That's for swelling, not plasma wounds. Which is why I brought this." She produced what was definitely a live penguin from the container. The bird looked as confused as everyone else in the room. "Lyra, why is there a penguin? Your nature documentaries showed them living on ice. I thought it would be comforting. His name is Medical Assistant Wadsworth." The penguin squawked and waddled toward Patel's equipment cart, immediately knocking over a tray of instruments. "Also," Lyreley continued, seemingly oblivious to the chaos the penguin was causing, "I brought soup. Humans consume soup when ill." She produced a thermos and opened it. The smell that emerged could only be described as what would happen if someone fermented Jim's socks in a sulfur spring. "It's a traditional Zeleny healing broth," she explained proudly. "My grandmother's recipe. It's supposed to cure everything from plasma burns to existential dread." "It's causing existential dread," Hartley managed, eyes watering. Medical Assistant Wadsworth had meanwhile discovered the medicine cabinet and was now wearing a surgical mask like a hat while Patel tried to corner him. "Your Majesty, Tors appeared in the doorway, taking in the scene, her injured commander, an alien queen holding toxic soup, and a penguin now attempting to nest in the biohazard bin. The Earth congressional delegation has arrived. They're requesting an audience about your relationship with Commander Hartley. Lyralay's ears went rigid. My relationship. As has the Zeleny High Council, Tors continued apologetically. They've both sent potential, alternative alliance candidates. Alternative alliance candidates. Hartley tried to sit up, immediately regretting it. I believe humans call them blind dates, Lyralay said, her voice carrying an edge that could cut titanium. My council has sent 3 princes, 2 duchesses, and someone called Chad, who claims to be Earth's most eligible bachelor. Chad. Hartley felt something hot and unpleasant twist in his chest that had nothing to do with his injuries. He brought flowers, they're aggressively yellow. Medical assistant Wadsworth chose that moment to escape Patel's grasp and waddle between them, squawking in what sounded like disapproval. He pecked at Hartley's blanket, then Lyralay's hand, then settled between them like a very small, formal chaperone. Your governments are trying to set us up with other people, Hartley said slowly, the pain medication making everything feel surreal. It appears so. She looked at him, and for a moment her carefully maintained royal mask slipped. James, when you were bleeding, when I thought, she stopped, then started again. The Zeleny have a word, Thylarami. It means the person whose absence would make the universe feel incorrectly assembled. Lyra, Your Majesty, another aide rushed in. Prince Zephex is insisting on demonstrating traditional Zeleny courtship dancing in the main hall. He's already injured 2 staff members with his ceremonial ribbons. And Chad is bench-pressing cargo containers in the hangar, Tors added. He says it's totally impressive and wants to know your maximum lift capacity, Commander. Hartley looked at Lyralay. She looked at him. Medical assistant Wadsworth looked at both of them and released what could only be described as a judgmental honk. I need to go deal with this, she said finally, but her hand brushed his as she stood, a gesture that felt more intimate than any grand declaration. Try not to get shot again while I'm gone. Try not to murder Chad. No promises. But she smiled as she said it, and something in that smile made his heart rate monitor beep again. As she left to deal with the political circus, Hartley found himself thinking that maybe getting shot had been worth it, if only for that moment when she'd said his name like a prayer, when she'd stayed despite every protocol saying she shouldn't, when she'd brought him a penguin because she'd thought it would help. Medical assistant Wadsworth pecked his hand sympathetically and settled in for a nap. The twin moons of New Haven hung like mismatched pearls against the nebula's violet sweep, casting shadows that danced across the observation deck's transparent aluminum floor. 2 years. Hartley couldn't quite reconcile that number with how it felt like both yesterday and a lifetime since he'd first met Lyralay in that destroyed station. She stood beside him now, studying a data pad with the intensity she usually reserved for battle plans or trying to understand human comedy shows. They just finished another successful colony integration ceremony, the 15th this month. The numbers were good, better than good. The peace was holding, economies were recovering, and someone had finally figured out how to make coffee that didn't taste like reactor coolant. So why did she look like someone preparing for war? Lyra, you've read that report 12 times in the last hour. I'm being thorough. You're stalling. Her ears twitched. The tell he'd learned meant she was nervous. I don't stall. I strategically delay for tactical advantage. Against what? The report isn't going to attack you. She set down the pad with more force than necessary. Behind them, both their security details had mysteriously found reasons to patrol the far end of the deck. Even medical assistant Wadsworth, who'd become the unofficial mascot of the peace process, had waddled off to investigate the fountain gardens. The Terran Congress sent another delegation, she said finally. Ambassador Chen brought his daughter. She's a xenobiologist, very interested in Zeleny culture, very interested in explaining Zeleny culture to you specifically. And your High Council. Duke Verathan arrived this morning with a presentation about bloodline compatibility and a 47-slide presentation about optimal genetic combinations for future alliances. 47 slides. With animations. They stood in silence, watching a cargo ship navigate the dock below. Someone had painted "Make Peace Not Pieces" on its hull, which had become something of a rallying cry for the reconstruction effort. "This is ridiculous," Hartley said finally. "We've spent 2 years rebuilding half the galaxy together. We've survived assassination attempts, budget meetings, and that incident with the sentient algae that took over Section 9. That was your fault. You're the one who said, 'What's the worst that could happen?' right before feeding it. My point is, we've been through everything together. We work together. We live on the same station. We share meals. You learned to play chess. I beat you at chess. You cheated at chess. Using your tail to move pieces when I'm not looking is definitely cheating. Prove it." He turned to face her fully, and something in his expression made her ears flatten slightly. "Lyra, what are we doing?" "Currently, standing on an observation deck arguing about chess." "You know what I mean." She was quiet for a long moment, then spoke in a voice smaller than he'd ever heard from her. "I don't know human courtship rituals. I've been reading about them, but they're confusing. Something about 3 dates and calling after waiting a specific number of days and sports metaphors I don't understand. What's scoring a home run, and why does it matter in romance? Forget about human rituals. What about Zeleny ones? We traditionally fight to the death for our chosen mate's honor. Okay, let's not do that. Or compose epic poems about their accomplishments. Please don't do that either. The last time you tried poetry, 3 translators quit." She laughed, that same snorting musical sound that had surprised him the first time. "Then what do I have to do?" The question hung between them, and suddenly she turned to face him fully, her violet eyes bright with something that looked like fear and determination mixed together. "What do I have to do to marry you, human?" The words seemed to echo across the deck, bouncing off the transparent walls and multiplying until Hartley could have sworn even the stars heard them. His brain, the tactical mind that had planned 17 major campaigns and survived 7 years of war, completely short-circuited. What? Marry? It's a human concept of legal and romantic partnership. I've researched it extensively. There are usually rings involved, though I'm not sure why. Also something about cake that people lie about enjoying. And dancing, which seems dangerous given how many humans have 2 left feet, which is a medical condition I was concerned about until Tors explained it was metaphorical. Lyra, I've prepared. She pulled out another data pad, swiping through screens with determined efficiency. I've studied human marriage customs from 47 different Earth cultures. I can perform the chicken dance, though I don't understand why poultry is involved. I've learned to cook 7 human dishes, although 3 of them may technically be classified as biological weapons. I've practiced saying, "I do" in 17 languages, including Klingon, which apparently some humans consider romantic for reasons that escape me. Lyra, I even asked medical assistant Wadsworth to be the ring bearer, though he ate the practice rings. Twice. We may need to use holographic ones, or very sturdy ones. Or perhaps we could train a different bird, though I've grown attached to his judgmental honking and... He kissed her. It was probably against 17 different protocols and definitely not approved by either of their governments, but he kissed her anyway. Her ears shot straight up in surprise before slowly, gently lowering as she melted into him. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing a bit unsteadily, she blinked at him. "So, is that a yes?" "You beautiful, brilliant, absolutely ridiculous woman," he said, touching his forehead to hers in the Zeleny gesture of deep affection she'd taught him. "You don't have to do anything. You never had to do anything except be yourself." Myself is a alien queen who accidentally ordered 5,000 tons of chocolate and brought you a penguin for medical treatment. Exactly. Perfect. Though we're keeping medical assistant Wadsworth out of the actual ceremony. He'll be offended. He'll survive. He's already the most decorated penguin in 3-star systems. She laughed, wrapping her arms around him. The governments are going to have opinions about this. Let them. What are they going to do? Fire us. We're the only ones who can keep this piece running. True, we do have an excellent track record. Only 12 major diplomatic incidents this month. 11. The thing with the Rigelian ambassador was definitely his fault. They were still arguing about it when their security details finally gave up pretending not to watch and started applauding. The news spread through the station's communication system faster than light speed, probably because Tors had been running a betting pool on when they'd finally figure it out. The wedding, when it happened 3 months later, was exactly the disaster everyone expected. The human tradition of something old, something new, something borrowed, something blue got mistranslated into Zeleny as something explosive, something toxic, something stolen, something on fire. Medical assistant Wadsworth did indeed eat the rings and had to be chased through the ceremony by 2 very dignified officials. The Unity candle somehow triggered the fire suppression system, soaking 300 guests from 2 species. The cake, a magnificent 7-tiered structure designed to incorporate both human and Zeleny preferences, lasted exactly 4 minutes before a disagreement about cutting technique led to what the media would later call the Great Frosting Incident of 2157. But when Hartley and Lyreley stood together, her hand in his forehead touching hers, reciting vows in a mixture of Terran Standard and High Zeleny that the translators gave up on halfway through, none of it mattered. "I promise," she said, her violet eyes bright with tears and laughter, "to always bring you the wrong medical supplies when you're injured." "I promise," he replied, "to always pretend your jokes are funny, even the physics ones. Especially the physics ones. Especially those." They kissed as 2 species cheered, as medical assistant Wadsworth honked disapprovingly at the noise, as the stars continued their ancient dance overhead, indifferent to the small miracle of 2 people from different worlds finding each other in the vastness of space. The peace held, not because of treaties or trade agreements or carefully negotiated terms, but because the 2 people at its center had done something far more radical than ending a war. They'd fallen in love, badly, clumsily, with terrible jokes and inadvisable penguins, and a complete failure to understand each other's cultures that somehow translated into understanding each other perfectly. And in the end, that was enough. More than enough, it was everything.